Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining us for today's Technology Insights Hub. We're just going to give a little bit of time to start with as people start making their way in. I know it takes a little bit of time for people to come in through the platform. But just by way of a brief introduction to start with, my name's Angela Tyrrell. I'm one of the LSX team. I'm a colleague of Jade's, who's obviously running the Food Biotech conference. So really pleased to be here with you all today to run our Technology Insights Hub looking at clean label sugar reduction advancements. We've got a couple of really great speakers for you today. So I'm going to hand over to them to introduce themselves in just a moment, and then we'll get into the presentations. But just a reminder, please do keep the cameras on. We like to see your faces. It's supposed to be an interactive session, and feel free to use either the chat or the hand raise button to put questions or comments into the speakers. You know, these sessions, I think everyone gets the most out of these sessions when they are interactive and people are keen to ask questions and engage or put comments in. So don't be shy. Do make sure that you're getting involved in that way. So before we jump into the presentations, I'm going to ask each of our speakers to give a brief introduction to themselves. Ari, I might start with you, please.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. My name is Ari Melamoud. I'm the CEO of Dumatalk. Joined the company just almost 5 months ago, so very recently. Spent most of my career at companies like Kimberly-Clark, Publicis, and then Sharon Labs, which is an ingredient company in the world of personal care and cosmetics and food. And then I'm excited to be with the great team of Dumatalk.
Great, thank you. And Ilan?
I'm Ilan Samish. I'm the founder and CEO of Amai Proteins, coming to Amai after a very multidisciplinary background in sciences and business administration, with a PhD from Weizmann Institute, postdoc from the University of Pennsylvania, and an academic career in which I've taught biology, chemistry, and computer science. And after publishing a book on computational protein design, I decided to open Amai and make a healthy and sweet future.
Oh, great. Well, welcome. Okay, so without further ado, let's get into our roundtable discussion. And we're going to kick off with a presentation from Ari. So Ari, you happy to share your screen and take it away there?
Yeah, sure.
Great.
So bear with me for a second. Just want to make sure that everybody can see the presentation. Actually, we can't see anything for some reason.
We had it just a minute ago.
Let me do it again. Can you watch? Can you see the screen?
Yes. Can see your screen, yes.
Okay, all right.
But no presentation just yet.
We see your email.
Seriously? Very strange.
That's all right. Do you want to try one more time?
Yeah.
I promised everyone we had this working 2 minutes before you joined. So there we go. Perfect.
All right. Third trial always works. Okay, guys. Excited to talk to you about sugar reduction. This is what we do. And let's talk about Dumatalk for the next 15 minutes. We define ourselves as a powerhouse of sugar reduction based on real sugar, and that is very different than all the alternatives in the market. And we'll talk about this in a second. So, in terms of who we are, or before who we are, let's talk about our mission. And you can read through this, but I want to say a few words. You know, we're all very lucky to be part of what I call the food revolution. If you think about this, people have been eating basically the same food since the history, thousands of years. And what's happening in the market today is a huge revolution. We're proud to be one of the companies leading this revolution, spearheading the sugar reduction. And we feel very proud to be part of this. Now, in a nutshell, who Dumatalk is, so the company was founded in 2014, so about 7 years ago. We're a B2B company. We've raised $30 million so far. And we have, obviously, as you will understand in a second, enormous impact on public health by reducing sugar. We now have more than 40-some patents registered. Most of them are already granted, some are pending. We have a world-class application lab that we've built, and we'll talk about this in a second. We're about 40-some people at the moment, but growing very, very quickly. And obviously, ESG is in the core of everything that we do. I guess at this session, I don't need to talk much about the problem of overconsumption of sugar. This has been a huge health problem around the world, and you see some of the facts here. And obviously, we're all entering a very established market that has been looking for solutions for a long, long time. Now, we need to realize that although everybody's looking for solutions, sugar reduction is very complex. And it's complex because it's combined two elements that are a must if you want to reduce sugar. One, you need to have an alternative for sugar or something that will add the sweetness to your recipe, to the formulation. And we'll talk about that in a second. But even if you were able to take sugar out, you need to put something back in, because as we all understand, sugar is not just sweet taste. Sugar is also a functional ingredient within the recipe, adding bulk and texture, shelf life, etc. And you need to have both work together if you want to reduce sugar. And that's why the few examples here of some really established brands that weren't so successful reducing sugar. So the main challenge that we all face, and that is across the entire, I would say, food revolution, is that taste is still number one. So the entire revolution will not happen if we cannot find alternatives or ways to reduce if we sacrifice the taste. Because consumers are clearly telling us, and every brand manager and every R&D guy at every CPG company knows that taste is the king. So whatever we do, we need to have still a tasty product. And that is a big challenge. So our value proposition as DumaTalk, and as I said, we see ourselves as a powerhouse of sugar reduction solution, is a combination of the two things. One, on the left side, we see our solution for taking sugar out, and that is Incredo Sugar. We'll talk about our solution in a minute, the Incredo Sugar product. And next to that is the ability to reformulate back the product to the original taste. So if we start talking about Incredo Sugar first, Incredo Sugar that we've developed is basically like any other sugar. It's made out of sugar cane. It's produced in sugar refineries under the same process. We're just adding a very small physical change at the end process of the production, where the drying process goes. So we're adding a carrier of 0.1 or 0.2%. So it's still 99.9% sugar with a carrier. It's a natural and clean taste, and it allows us to substantially reduce sugar by anything from 30 to 50%. Now, if we need to understand how it works, let's imagine that we take a bite of a milk chocolate, and a milk chocolate as a standard would have anything from 50% sugar in it and up. Now, while we're taking a bite and we're chewing it for 2-3 seconds, only a small portion of the sugar that is inside the product, inside our mouth, actually dissolves and reaches our taste receptors. The rest, and that's about 20-30% of the sugar inside that bite. The rest, which is 70 to 80% of the sugar inside a product, doesn't affect the taste at all because it doesn't dissolve. It just goes directly into our body and turns immediately almost into fat. The way we structure our product is that while we take the same bite, our crystals are more amorphous, so they break quicker, and therefore more sugar dissolves and reaches the taste receptors. So basically what we do is we can add sweetness because more sugar reaches taste receptors under the same time. But this also allows us actually to reduce sugar and still have the same sweetness as the original product. It's a very different approach and quite genius, I think, because we're using sugar to reduce sugar. And obviously the taste is not affected because we still have sugar in the product and the sweetness comes from sugar. The second part is on the right side. That by itself is not enough because once we've taken let's say 40 or 50% of the sugar out, we need to add something back. And this is what we've mastered over the past 2 years or so by building a team of food scientists and formulators, probably the best in the market, that are specifically working day and night about adding back fillers. And in a minute, we'll talk about the different fillers and opportunities that we have to add back the bulk and give the formula back the original taste. We work through world-class application labs that we've built. We customize solutions per customer or per formula of a customer. We now have deep understanding of the food metrics, more than 200 recipes, over more than 50 applications. And through that process over the past few years, we've gathered a huge sensory database because everything that we do is tested through sensory tests. So when we talk about the fillers, this is the opportunity that we have. So once we've taken sugar out, we want to add better for you ingredients back into the product. So either it's fibers or proteins or better fats, or even low cost box, because you know the impact on the cost of the product might be could be significant. So we need to look at different solutions, and that's the only way to reduce sugar is the combination of incredible sugar, which keeps the original taste of sugar because it's made out of sugar, with the fillers that we're adding back into the product. This is an example of a product that we've developed. So it's the identical product that we've developed in the labs to Nutella. And this is a consumer test that we've run based on our formula compared to the original product, which is Nutella. And we all know Nutella is a huge brand that enjoys huge market shares and a very known taste. And you can look at the results. We can actually win 60-40, and that's a blind taste. If we were doing under concept test, so if people would know that this is a huge reduction in sugar, I'm sure the numbers would be even higher. So just before we end, what I've described was our first generation. We're just about to launch into next year our second generation. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time today to cover the second generation, but it's from my perspective, it's a game changer even compared to the first generation, because it has a lot of benefits through the experience and the feedbacks that we got from the market in the past couple of years. We need to understand that the first generation is already in the market. We have products that are on the shelves in Israel with our incredible sugar in it. We'll have a series of exciting products on the shelves in the US beginning of next year in the first quarter. And then probably sometime into mid next year is when our second generation will be launched, and we believe that would add a significant attractiveness to our offering to consumers. And then obviously, if people are interested, there's a lot of media coverage for Dumotalk and incredible sugar, especially since you know, sugar reduction is a big issue and the media likes to talk about sugar reduction. But I think the latest one, which I recommend everybody that wants to understand sugar reduction, is the Netflix episode in Explain. They have a whole episode that talks about sugar, and we were not aware of that, but they took Dumotalk as probably the best solution for sugar reduction at the moment. So they gave us a lot of exposure there, and that drove a lot of customers and an interest. So I recommend people to watch that if you want to understand the sugar reduction a bit more. That's pretty much it in the 10-15 minutes that I had.
Thanks very much, Ari. So we'll hand straight over to Ilan, and then we'll open the floor up for some questions. I do remind you all, please feel free to put questions into the chat beforehand if questions are, I suppose, coming to you as we go. But in the meantime, I'm going to hand over to you, please, Ilan.
Thank you. And I will give a slightly different presentation. I decided not to give the regular marketing presentation, but as we are talking about sugar reduction solutions, I will talk about AMI, but in the larger frame of sugar reduction. Do you see the slide well? Okay, so AMI is sweet in Japanese, and we are about making designer proteins for the mass food market, with finally having a healthy sugar substitute. And just to put a word about that, and before we go into that, the fact that both Ari and myself come from Israel, there was a very recent report just came out of Deep Knowledge Analytics of 300 startups in the field of food tech. 12% come from Israel, so we have a lot of innovation here, and I'm very happy to be here also with a good number of companies in the sugar reduction space, and actually established in Israel the Sweet Science Academic Industry Forum, which is all about synergy between different people that are into the sugar reduction space. Now, if we look into the Lux Research independent report about sugar reduction strategies, they speak about 8 different categories of sugar reduction, which includes the high-intensity artificial and naturally derived sweeteners, the whole foods, which from my point of view is in a way some deception, because honey, agave syrup, and others are full of sugar, but they have a more natural not taste to it, but actually name to it, but it's just the same sugar. Then you have the physical modifications, and Ari and Dumatok are in the field of physical modifications. I tasted their Nutella-like chocolate spread, which is very good. You have the rare monosaccharides, the sugar alcohols, and I left for last the taste modifiers, which include actually sweet proteins. So you do have sweet proteins in the market. You have a sweet protein called dalmatine, and it is found in 500 different products, very best in Japan, but also in other places. But if we look at all of these solutions, then beyond 30%, and 30% is what is needed for sugar reduction labeling, you usually have an issue with taste, cost, health, or product fitness, usually more than one of these categories. And consequently, you have some solutions which are good for very specific products, but not for all of them. So while sugar was established, and actually it's a pure study in Lancet in 2016, when I just opened my established sugar as public enemy #1 of non-communicable diseases, so ones that are not transferred by pathogens, you have a big issue that you don't have a real solution, and still the diet market is very small. Now, if we look on proteins, and proteins which come from precision fermentation, and I'll say in a moment what it is, we need to think about cheese. Because in the past, when you needed to do cheese, you took milk and you threw into it the stomach of usually a pig, because you needed chymosyne, an enzyme that came out of the belly of usually pigs. But today, 99% of the cheese in the world is produced by this enzyme that is produced in microorganisms, in E. coli, in yeast, in mold, in aspergillus. And while we think about the holes as mice, this is actually done by a protein that is done by precision fermentation. But this is a processing agent, namely it is not part of the final product, and consequently we don't think about it. It's not part of the labeling. Well, what we do is we do designer proteins which are computationally designed and go for the meat, plant, milk, and sweet categories. And that basic idea is quite simple. Proteins in nature are not stable and not usually costly and not easy to produce. But there are proteins also that grow in very harsh environments, in the Dead Sea, hot springs, deep in the ocean, acidic swamps, and so on. And they are more fit for the mass food market, which is a very harsh environment. And consequently, what we do is we take proteins with good functionalities and we redesign them to make them more like proteins which are really fit to the mass food market. So I won't talk here about computational protein design. Happy to send to anyone interested my book on the field, which became, I think, the main book in the field. The way we produce it is by precision fermentation. Fermentation is the oldest technology in the book of food technology, and whether it is beer, wine, kimchi, yogurt, in all of these cases, we eat or drink everything from the fermenter. In our case, we add a layer of harvesting, meaning that at the end of the day, we get a white powder, and we are in the business, just like Ari, of selling a white powder that makes people happy and is sweet, each one of us from a very different angle. So we take a protein that comes from nature, and nature is heaven for proteins, and we fit it to the mass food market, making it more stable, better tasting, and we produce it in a sustainable precision fermentation manner. So we have proteins for plant milk, but I will talk only about sugar today because this is the main protein that is already used by numerous companies. It is still not in the market. Within a year, we will reach the market. It is currently under R&D collaborations with several of the world's biggest users of sweeteners. So in a nutshell, we begin with agile integrative computational protein design. We then get a new sequence. It's a novel protein, 100% protein. We take the genes that codes it, we put it into consumer-friendly microorganisms, yeast and fungi, and then we make food. We have an in-house flavor house where we do sugar reduction. And just as Ari said, taste is the king. So we don't do sugar elimination, we do sugar reduction. Our ketchup has 70% less added sugar, and you won't be able to distinguish our ketchup from the full sugar ketchup. In other products, we have 40–50% sugar reduction, and each one we fit it to the level where people will not be able to distinguish between the full sugar product and our product. And we have for that a sensory panel, which comes several times a week for blind tasting of our different products. And you can see here some cranberry juice that we are making with Ocean Spray, and you can see their press release about the collaboration with us. So in this session, we don't need to talk about the fact that sugar is a global epidemic underlying the metabolic syndrome, of which obesity and diabetes are most known, but there is a long list of other issues associated with that. But we also need to remember that beyond the fact that in the sustainability development goals of the UN, it touches SDG number 3 of good health and well-being, it also affects numerous other SDGs because sugar contaminates air, land, and sea in sugar production and transportation. It actually affects the lower socioeconomics the most and is associated with hunger and with poverty and inequality. So while many companies in their impact plan have a question on which SDG to follow, in our quantitative impact plan, there was an issue in which one not to follow. And in the health issue, even in Credit Suisse, which is not exactly a tree-hugging organization, said that without significant sugar tax, the world health system will simply collapse. Still, 90% of the market is sugar and high fructose corn syrup, with the rest being not tasty and not healthy, as American Heart Association put a very bold warning against high-intensity sweeteners, whether they are natural or not, it doesn't matter. It put it in the same bucket because these affect the microbiome, liver, and kidneys, because all of these, sugar or not, are small molecules which, after they interact with our sweet receptor in the oral cavity, then interact with sweet receptors which line our gut, but also with a microbiome, liver, and kidneys. We move to big molecules, to proteins, which activate our sweet receptor just like any other sweetener, but then are fully digested in the upper gastrointestinal tract just like any other protein. And we have proven that, of course, as part of our FDA approval. Well, in nature, you have numerous exotic fruits which are sweetened by sweet proteins. These are between 700 and 3,000 times sweeter than sugar, have no insulin response, de facto no calories. A kilogram of protein and a kilogram of sugar have the same amount of calories, but when you have such high potency, there are no calories and no effect on the body inside, only on the oral cavity. And if this is so good, why aren't we using them? That's because they are costly, have low stability, and have a lingering taste. all things that we solved according not only to what we say, but also external report. Our sweetener actually is cheaper than sugar in sweetness units and has a sugary taste up to a certain amount, which is a very significant sugar reduction potency. Along the way, we won numerous awards. We won't get into all of these, and we have now a very strong list of investors from the Singaporean government to numerous VCs in several different companies. We are now approaching, this is already an old slide, 30 people with 9 PhDs, moving to our production phase and to the scale up, including the regulatory path. And next month, we are having an official talk with the FDA about our regulatory side. Just to give the broader framework before I finish, when we look on different organisms, we think about the entire organism, but what we actually can often want and can use is specific proteins. Actually, leg hemoglobin is the main protein that is innovation behind Impossible Foods. Beta-lactoglobulin is the main innovation behind Perfect Day Foods. One is made in yeast, one is made in fungi, and in the past, Unilever did an ice structuring protein from the ocean trout and did it in yeast. So these are well known in the market, and these are all ingredients. You have a triple-digit number of processing agents which are already in the market. So to sum up, AMAI is a moonshot coupling the huge challenge of sugar overconsumption with several breakthrough technologies of agile integrative computational protein design, precision fermentation, and a flavor house to produce a radical solution of the first tasty, healthy, and sustainable sweetener. And we do that through our pro-protein platform, which is pro-taste, and taste is definitely above all, and that's a king. Pro-people who want a good taste but want much less sugar. Pro-planet, much more sustainable health and industry. And after we learned with COVID-19 that curing disease, we must go to preventive measures and to vaccination, we are now at the step of curing the food we eat, and we need to do that by preventive medicine, by doing better nutrition and having less sugar without compromising the taste. I can go on to different topics such as a FDA-sponsored workshop that we work to give recommendations to the FDA, 67 stakeholders, only 2 startups, the CEO of Perfect Day Foods and myself, about the language of food and how to move to the regulatory landscape of Food 2.0. But I think that with this, I've said enough for the beginning, and let's leave some time for a Q&A.
Wonderful. Thanks, Ilan. And look, thank you both for those presentations. So we have about 15 minutes. Ari, have you got some questions you wanted to open with, or should we hand over to the audience? What's your preference here?
No, I'd like to hear some questions from the audience. This is what they're here.
Exactly. So everyone, please feel free to put any questions or comments into the chat. I am going to ask you all to please put one thing into the chat for me. We will address them in a little bit, but I'd love to hear from all of our audience about what you see as the number one challenge in this field of sugar reduction and sugar alternatives. If you could please drop those into the chat, I'd love to hear a little bit from, we'll throw back to our speakers in a moment to address those as well. So we've got a question here from Anouk. And Anouk, would you like to come on to take your microphone off so you can ask the question out loud?
Hi, yeah, sorry. No, I'm just wondering, of all the sugars present in food, you hear a lot about glucose, and there's solutions for removing glucose, for example, but then there's fructose left behind. And I'm just wondering, what's your opinion on the effects of those on the health, whether it's really glucose we're talking about, or are there others? And yeah, what are your thoughts there?
Ilan, you want to take this?
Yes, I will take this. This is a very easy thing for me to answer, and I will put here just a second. I just am putting here in the chat the answer. And the answer is from Rob Lustig. Rob Lustig is the sugar #1 fighter in the world, a pediatric endocrinologist who made a mission to cut down sugar. And as he claims, fructose is much more dangerous than glucose. And within sucrose, we have half fructose and half glucose, and they're actually holding hands for a glycosidic bond, which within a millisecond dissolves. So it's actually just like eating half glucose and half fructose. So glucose is underlying diabetes. Glucose is digested mainly in the different tissues, and fructose makes non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Fructose also makes our body brown through a Maillard reaction, and that also brings us some cancer, and has numerous other issues. In a long lecture by Rob Lustig, you will hear more about it. So there is, from my point of view, no question fructose is public enemy #1, followed by sucrose, followed by glucose. When we go to the low intensity and high intensity sweeteners, there is a debate which one is the least worst. And from my point of view, I will be very careful about talking about them, because overall, the current recommendations of the global and the American, for that sake, health organizations of the medical policy organizations is that water is better than anything else in sweeteners. But if we go to sweeteners, the high intensity sweeteners are less bad than sugar, and within them stevia has a relatively good name. And Rob said in one of his talks that it is twice less bad than sugar. I'm citing him according to literature that he is finding, and I must say there is a huge debate on that. I'll also cite Sam Marco. Sam Marco was the CTO of SodaStream. He was there from the time it was a $6 million company to the time it was sold to PepsiCo for $3.2 billion. Today, he is at AMI heading our food technology flavor house. And he told me he once spoke with his VP of marketing, told him that aspartame is very good. And after 45 minutes, the guy said, well, you persuaded me, now go and persuade the other 7 billion people who thinks that aspartame is terrible. And here there is a point that today there is a bad notion, and I'm not arguing whether it is correct or not, I'm just saying it is out there in the consumers about high intensity sweeteners. There are also, like I cited, the American Heart Association 2018 advisory, there are issues associated with them with microbiome and other things. So yes, we need better things, and fructose is the worst thing to eat.
And if I may add maybe one sentence on this, because I think, thanks, Ilan, I think it's a great answer. I would put it a little differently. I think sugar is not so bad. Sorry for saying that. Actually, when you talk to a lot of people, you know, sugar is a great source of energy. It's natural. The problem with sugar is not the sugar. The problem with sugar is the overconsumption of sugar. And when we eat too much of it, and we definitely eat way too much of it, this is where the problem starts. So I think the mission that both Ilan and I share of reducing sugar is the right way to tackle this. You talk about the alternatives. As Ilan said, you know, different stories, different views, different research. They all have one thing in common. They don't taste like sugar, which is a big problem. And therefore, we believe that the right solution is not to take sugar all out, it's to significantly reduce sugar. And that's the best solution, the most practical solution. That is the balance between health and taste.
I must add 2 sentences. Number 1, sugar in very moderate amounts is not so terrible for you. And in my cup of tea, I do put 1/4 of a teaspoon of sugar. And I'm saying this out loud despite working in a company that fights sugar. Having said that, and as a biochemist and Rob Lustig will be much more extreme on that. We don't need sugar in order to survive. We can make our own glucose. And from his point of view, sugar is only bad in very small amounts. It is not. We can look at the consumption of sugar in the last century, and it went up dramatically up concerning how many teaspoons we eat every day. And definitely that's the biggest issue. But if we could eliminate sugar altogether, then we would maybe live in a happier life. But in the same way of thinking, if we could not drive, we would not have car accidents, and we still drive. So there is here a question between risk and between indulgence. And indulgence and having tasty things, and taste is the king, as we all agree. It does have its cost, and right now we need to significantly reduce the amount of sugar we eat.
Great answers, both of you. Thank you. Anouk, does that clarify? Have you got any comments to add from that?
Oh, that was great. Thanks very much.
Brilliant. Okay, fantastic. Now, Andrew's put a comment in that I think is off the back of the challenges question that I asked. Andrew, if you're happy to also bring your microphone on, I'd love to hear you clarify that in a little bit more detail and let our panelists comment on that.
Hello, everybody. My name is Andrew Toll. I'm a partner at Next Gen Nutrition Investment Partners, which is a VC focusing on things like this. We have investment in a company that can make healthy rare sugars like tagatose, allulose, mannose, and so forth and so on. And the biggest challenge they're facing is regulatory, especially in the EU. And it's not that these aren't existing things in nature. Obviously, those are natural sugars. They're just rare. But just the regulatory lead times to bring these to market are onerous and resource intensive and tricky for startups. Anyway, just had, and of course that leads to a first approval, but secondly, how to treat it on labels. So just curious your thoughts around that, and especially the products that you're making. How does that fare? Thanks.
Harry, you're on mute.
Thank you. I'll take this one first. In our case, we're using sugar. We're sugar. So what goes on the label is sugar, and that's it. It's very simple, and therefore no regulation is required.
In our case, it's a very different ball game. What we have is 100% protein. As Angela opened, we are looking here on clean label session, and the very word clean label is a question, because while we have 100% protein, we have a novel protein which is not found in nature. So it is produced by the ribosome just like any other protein. It's 100% protein. It is digested just like any other protein, but it is not found in nature. And there is a question in different places about the word natural, for example. What is natural? Labeling in our case is simply 100% protein sweetener. We are well aware of all the issues with the low intensity sweeteners and the rare sugars. And in our case, we see a marked difference between different regulatory authorities. The GMO issue is also a issue, and here we must add that in both EFSA, the European Food Safety Authority, and the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, we are not considered GMO. Our GMM, genetically modified microorganism, is legally considered a processing agent. And as long as we show that in the final product there is no remains of the host organism, then we don't need to go through the GMO track. Having said that, we also need to remember that the FDA is still traumatized by thalidomide. Thalidomide is a small molecule which is very good for people with nausea, especially pregnant women. Unfortunately, men cannot be pregnant, but the mirror image, the racemic mixture mirror image, inactive compound of the good drug, made babies with no limbs. And the FDA is still traumatized with that, and consequently with small molecules, there is a very different ball game compared to big molecules, to proteins. Another issue is that there is a huge difference between the European Food Safety Authority and the FDA and the Singaporean Food Agency and others. We know that SFA is the first one to authorize cultured or cell-based meat, whatever you want to call it, while others are still cautious about it. And we know about the EU unbelievable regulation about gene editing, and many consumers will say, we will never eat DNA, not knowing that in every tomato or steak they eat, there is DNA. So there is here a lot of issues about education of consumers and regulators. I was very fortunate to be invited by the FDA, paid by the FDA, to an Institute of Science and Global Policy meeting where was caucuses in a very ordered manner with 67 stakeholders from public advocacy groups to big multinationals. We discussed different ways to optimize the regulatory landscape. There was also some top brass coming from EFSA. We were 5 days held in Hilton in Minneapolis. We couldn't go out. So I'm happy to send to anyone who is interested the booklet that came out of it. I think that in the long run, this is perhaps the biggest issue. And if we go to Thomas Kuhn in his 1969 book on the structure of scientific revolutions, this is a scientific revolution. We are moving to disruptive technologies, and we need to remember that it took 50 years till we accepted cars, and there were not rules about not being able to bypass a horse or to drive slower than a horse because you will make the horse with some anxiety. So we are there, and I think with disruptive technology, at the end of the day, it gets accepted, but it does take time.
Thanks, Ilan. And actually, we sort of moved on to AJ's question there as well. But AJ, are you happy to enable your mic looking at the regulatory path for novel protein sweeteners? Is that clarified everything for you? Do you have any follow-up from that?
No, I think it looks good. Thank you.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Okay, I have a couple more questions for you both before we wrap up. And just a reminder to the audience, if you do have any last minute questions, please do put them into the chat. But the first one for both of you, Ilan and Ari, is can you, I suppose, point to how each of your technologies are different from other sugar reduction technologies or sugar reduction solutions that are out there, either on the market or in development? Ari, let's start with you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So again, I think I've mentioned this a few times already. The market has been dealing with sugar reduction for decades, and there are different alternatives in the market. The one thing that is common for all the alternatives that exist in the market today is that they're not made out of sugar, and therefore they don't taste like sugar. And since we've agreed multiple times already that taste is the king, that is a showstopper. That doesn't mean that there's no success with some of the alternatives, depends on the application, but I think that what we bring to the market is completely new and fresh approach that allow us to reduce sugar with sugar. And that is a very unique concept. There's no other company in the world working under that concept. And by allowing by making our sugar dissolve faster and so more sugar reaches the taste receptor, that's the whole thing. That's the philosophy behind our technology. And it's very different than anything else that exists in the market.
Great answer. Ilan?
So in our case, we're really disrupting the market with a first time that we can put the words healthy, sustainable, tasty, and sweet in the same sentence. Just like Ari, we are not doing sugar elimination, we are doing sugar reduction. We are well fit to the beverage market and to numerous other liquid and solid markets. We are not fit at the moment to high temperature baking or frying. The beverage market accounts for most It's the biggest category in sugar consumption, and a known secret of the industry that the sweetened beverage industry is going down double digit in the last century, in the last decade, sorry. And we bring here a revolutionary way. There are diet products in the market for a long time, but they are still a very small percentage of the market because taste is the king. There are other sweet proteins in the market, mainly thaumatin, which is approved, but this is more a taste modulator, a taste enhancer and masker, and not a main sugar reduction agent. So at the end of the day, I think we bring something completely new and disruptive to the market.
Great. And finally, before we wrap up, I'd like to know what each of you would say to anyone else on this call who might be following in your footsteps. If you could give one piece of advice from what you've learned so far on your journey, what would that be? Start with Ari again.
Yeah, so I think that my answer would be is to find a replacement for sugar. As I've mentioned, my presentation is a ticket to the game, but it's not enough. So it's fine that both Ilan and I have different solutions, both, by the way, great solutions, I think, and very distinct solutions. But once we've taken the sugar out, most of the companies today don't know how to reformulate back. And without having that knowledge and know-how, we will not be successful. So it goes hand in hand, the solution from the product standpoint and the know-how. And therefore, what we offer to our customers is a complete solution, not a product.
Great answer. And Ilan?
I would open just with a sentence to answer Sarah about the word healthy, which is heavily regulated. Yes, that is correct. We have a lot of data on digestibility, allergenicity, and other issues to show that there are no remains of the protein in the body. And consequently, unlike sugar, which is not healthy, we can use this word, but we are very cautious about labeling and other issues in accordance with different regulatory rules. And we're actually beginning now clinical trials, which are not needed from the regulatory standpoint, but will help us in the marketing to opinion leaders. What we have learned in the journey is that from a very young stage, it is very important to work with our big consumers. We have numerous joint development agreements and material transfer agreements, of which we are in joint grants, such as the EIT Food Consortium grants, which we have with companies such as PepsiCo, Danone, Maspex, and others. There is a press release by the CEO of Ocean Spray about our collaboration on cranberry products, several different products. And I think that to learn from the big companies and their needs and their language, and also on consultation on what really bothers them and what we need to show them, is something that we learned is very important. It is not always easy for a company with 5 people, and we actually started collaborations with a company with 3 people, with companies with 300,000 people. So it was not easy to do such collaborations, but I think it allowed us in a very quick way to tailor what we need for the big companies. And to follow up on the previous answer, I'll say that we began here with a food technology department, actually 1 person in the beginning, and now we have a big flavor house, big for such a small startup, because we understood that in order to have companies really understand what we do, we need to make a prototype and not just give them the white powder. We need to make the prototype, and we need also to be modest, because we can do only so and so. We made a strategic decision that while we can do sugar elimination, we want to be comparable in taste to full sugar, and consequently we do sugar reduction. We further push it by other solutions, whether it is bulking agents or other sweeteners, and then we can give a whole solution to the market.
All right, fantastic. Oh, we've got one last question that's just come in. Very, very quickly, 30-second answers from each of you. How do either of these options help with preservation, say to reduce sugar in AW controlled products, jams, chutneys, etc.? Very, very quick answer from each of you, please. Ilan, let's start with you.
So we are replacing the sweetening part. We are not replacing the mouthful. We are not replacing the texture. We are not replacing the texture, and we are not replacing the water activity and other issues of that sugar brings to you. So yes, in some products, sugar is very important for such things. But we also note that with less sugar, with the amounts that we reduce, in most cases, we don't need to add preservatives. We actually have here a whole room with incubators because each company has a different protocol for shelf life, and we do 1-year shelf life studies for our different products. But definitely this is something that is on our table, and I cannot say that in 100% of the cases, we don't need sugar just as a preservative.
Great. And Ari?
Not much to add to that. I completely agree with Ilan on this. Once you reduce anything up to 50% of the sugar, doesn't really affect the shelf life of the product. And therefore, we don't have to deal with that.
Fantastic. We're getting a few more questions coming in, actually. We do unfortunately need to wrap up. This was supposed to be a 45-minute session, and we need to give people time to move on to the next session that's starting on the hour. So what I would ask you to do, though, is please use the partnering system to put your questions directly to Ilan and Ari. It's very, very user-friendly. It's very simple to do. Just have a dig around the Swapcard platform. Any questions, just let us know. You can find the staff very easily if you need any help with that. Do put your questions directly to them, and they can answer sort of outside of this session. But look, I wanted to thank Ilan and Ari for wonderful presentations and so much insight today. And of course, thank you all for watching. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for being so interactive. It's been fantastic. We have another panel coming up, our closing panel for today, looking at delivering clean flavors, colorants, preservatives, and antioxidants. So do join that if you're keen, particularly as Ilan was talking on, to hear about some of the approaches taken by some of the very big companies as well. So do hang around and listen to that session. And then we'll be back online tomorrow at 12 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time, going into US time as well, into the afternoon. So love to see you all back there again tomorrow. But in the meantime, thank you all so much. Have a great evening, especially Ilan and Ari. Thank you for sticking around. I know it's fairly late for you guys. Have a great evening / day wherever you are in the world, and we'll hope to see you soon.